Hello, everybody. I hope you're having a great Friday afternoon so far today. My name is Jake from Umbrella IT Services, and today we are going to be talking about Social Engineering 101, or IT security tips for small businesses, regular businesses, nonprofits, and entrepreneurs. So some of the topics that we're going to be covering today are: what is information security? What is IT security? We're going to be talking about threats and liabilities for your small business. We're going to be talking about social engineering tips. We're going to be talking about phishing scams, and we're going to be talking about a whole lot of other stuff. So without any further ado, we're going to jump on in, and I will go ahead and cover these topics for you. Hopefully you find them valuable. At a later date, probably this afternoon, we will have some timestamps below. So if you don't feel like watching the whole video, you're going to be able to look down in the description, and you will be able to click on the timestamp and go to the topic that you want to watch. And if you want to train your staff and have them watch a section of the video, it'll be easier for them to watch that stuff as well. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the fun part of this, which is the statistics. So looking at these statistics here, you can see that 71% of ransomware attacks targeted small, medium business organizations in 2018 with an average ransom demand of $116,000. So what that means is that 71% of ransomware attacks had an average cost to a small or medium business of $116,000. So that's the cost to your business. That's the cost to your nonprofit. That's the cost to your startup if you end up getting hit by something like ransomware. So what ransomware is, very, very quickly, is a piece of software that gets installed on your computer like a virus, and it can lay dormant, it can become activated right away, and what it does is it locks your computer. It encrypts your computer, and it requires that you get a crypto key from the hacker that hacked your computer, and then you can unlock your computer and decrypt it and gain access to your files again. So unless you have a good backup that's off-site, you're going to lose access to all of your data if you get hit by ransomware, and you're going to have to pay a hacker an average ransom of $116,000 USD. So obviously not a good time there. Looking at the second little fact here, we've got 60% of organizations lose access to their data for 16 days or longer after suffering a ransomware attack. So that means that if you, again, you're a nonprofit, you're an entrepreneur or a startup, or you're an established business, you're looking at 16 days of downtime if you get hit by ransomware on average. So again, coupling that with the cost of $116,000 per instance of the hack, combining that with going down for 16 days, this is a type of attack that's very difficult for most small businesses to survive. So it's very important to focus on security. And the next little fact we've got down here is 54% of the people that have been hacked believe that their companies were too small to be ransomware targets. So I hear that from a lot of my clients where they say, we're too small, we're not important enough, we don't have any sensitive data, we're never going to get hit by this stuff. And we have had to help more than a couple of our clients out. They've become clients of ours after they've gotten hit by this kind of stuff. And in retrospect, they tell us, we never would have thought we would have gotten hit by this. We had an IT guy. He told us he was doing security. He told us that he was doing all these kind of things. And it does become a problem for a lot of folks because they're not properly prepared or equipped to deal with these situations. So at the end of this presentation, we will have a list of security tips and backup tips for folks. So looking up here in the top right corner, we can see the attack vectors used against small and medium business organizations, and that would also include nonprofits. And you can see here the overwhelming majority of the types of attacks that came up were malware attacks. Below that, we have account hijacking. So this would be where someone gets access to your account online. Not very good. And then we've got targeted attacks where people are they have their business actually hacked. DDoS attacks, which is where the connection to your business to the internet gets taken down. We've got malicious browser extensions where someone will hack through your Google Chrome web browser or something like that, or an internal employee or other vulnerabilities. So you can see the overwhelming concern here is malware. So that's what we're going to focus on today, is keeping people safe from malware. Below, we can see here the number of SMB data breaches. There's been a 425% increase in data breaches targeting small and medium businesses from 2017 to 2019. So this is on a dramatic incline. There's a big increase in activity. A lot of these attacks now have been automated by these malicious hackers, and it is very important to make sure that you have the proper security and backup solutions in place to make sure that your association is going to be safe should you be targeted by these hackers. Moving on now, we're going to kind of get into the nitty-gritty here and kind of define what is information security. So the formula that I use when I'm making sure that my client's data is safe is I make sure that the confidentiality, the integrity, the availability, and the accountability of their data remain intact. So what that means is that under confidentiality, your data needs to be confidential. You need to make sure that you're keeping your data confidential using data management policies and technical security solutions. So what that means is that if you don't want someone to be able to see your data, they can't see it. What is confidential remains confidential. That means you have to be securing user accounts. It means you have to be encrypting sensitive data. You want to make sure you're securing your devices and your networks, both physically and digitally. You need to make sure you're using antivirus. You need to make sure you have a firewall. You need to make sure that you're managing data access. You don't want to have a file share set up where your receptionist has all of the same access to information as your CEO does. That's not going to work for any business. You've also got to make sure that you're implementing data management policies if you want to make sure that you're continuing to keep the confidentiality of your data secure. Moving on to integrity, as you can see here, we've got ensuring that your data has not been damaged or modified by human error, hardware, software, or security failures by regularly validating logs and reviewing data. So what this means is that when you go into your data, let's say you're looking at a spreadsheet that has passwords in it, which we don't recommend, or if you've got just a regular Word document for your budget for the year, you want to make sure that the integrity of that document remains intact. You don't want to have someone be emailing off data and documents to other people. They get sent back duplicates. All of a sudden you have 3 or 4 different versions of this document. That's just as big of a deal to the integrity of your data as it is if someone goes inside of that document and maliciously alters it. So it's very important to make sure the integrity of your data also remains intact. Next, we have availability. So it's very important to make sure that your data remains available to you. So that means if you have a server and it goes down, you have a redundancy plan in place. You're going to be able to access that data. We talked about this in the last seminar, but it's got to be in 3 different places at all times. 2 of those places have to be different vendors, and 1 of those places needs to be completely separate from your active access. So it's very important to make sure that your data is available at all times. What we want to do there is make sure that you have a plan to keep your data safe. So again, make sure you're working with your IT provider or your IT serviceman, that he's going to make sure or she is going to make sure that your data is available at all times. You have redundancy in place. Make sure you're eliminating single points of failure. If you have one network switch in your office that controls all of your internet, make sure you have a backup in your storage room. If you have one laptop, make sure that you have one backup laptop in case you spill coffee on it. Make sure that if you have one drive set up and you're accessing things through the internet, make sure you have one computer where all that data is syncing locally, so you're still going to be able to access that data in case of a service outage. You also want to make sure you're instituting automatic failover, which means that if something goes down, it automatically comes back up through a backup or a redundancy plan. So if you have one server, have a second server running. If you have a cloud service that you're using, have your local backup set up on your computer. So it's very important to make sure that you're using the right tools so that your data remains available to you at all times. So looking at accountability next, we want to make sure that when something happens in your business, you're prepared for it. So what that means is that if you have a data breach, if you have a file go missing, if you have the integrity of a document get compromised, if the confidentiality gets compromised, you want to be able to go into your logs and look at what happened. So again, a lot of this stuff does pertain to your IT guy. If you're an HR manager, if you're a business owner, I would just recommend that when you sit down with your IT guy, you ask him, how are you keeping the confidentiality in place? You ask her, how are you maintaining the integrity of our documents? And they should be able to give you answers to each of these questions. And as long as they don't set off any alarms, you can continue to work with that provider Otherwise, I would recommend getting a second opinion from another service provider. So looking at the accountability again, it's very important to make sure that if an incident happens, you're able to check your logs, check your events, and see what happens. So you can also get monthly reports from your provider that show all of the activity that's going on, so you can see what kind of accountability they have in place. And if it is too much and you think it's too invasive, then they can dial it down. If you want to see more accountability, there are some of our clients that like to have screenshots of their employees' screens as they're working. Other people like to just have a hard drive is failing and files were deleted from this location. So it really does depend on what your needs are as a business owner, as an HR manager, as a small business, as a nonprofit, or as a startup. So moving on here, these are the threats and liabilities that exist for most businesses, nonprofits, and startups or entrepreneurs. So in terms of your devices are liable to a couple of different threats when compared to your networks, cloud services, and users. So looking at the devices side of things, you can see here we've got virus or ransomware infection. I'm sure everyone's aware of that. You got to make sure if you're on a Mac, Macs now get more viruses than PCs, so make sure that your Mac is running antivirus. We recommend using Sentinel-1. If you don't use Sentinel-1, which is an AI-powered antivirus, we do recommend using ESET antivirus or Malwarebytes antivirus. So I'll probably link to those in the description down below if people are interested in that. But make sure that you're using something that's going to catch virus or ransomware should it breach your systems and get onto your devices. The next thing that we usually like to warn people about is hardware damage. A lot of people don't consider this, but hardware damage is something that can happen, and you need to make sure that your device has a redundancy plan in place in case it happens to you. So if you have somebody spill coffee on a device, is my favorite example, it happens all the time. If you're carrying it in a bag and you drop the bag, or you throw the bag down too hard and you break the LCD, you don't want to not be able to work because of a silly mistake like that. You should always have a spare device somewhere in the office. It doesn't matter if it's your 10-year-old laptop that sounds horrible when you turn it on and dust spews out of it. It's better than not being able to work at all. So make sure that you have a redundancy plan in place for your devices. Another thing that can happen is software failure. What we do in our management plans is we schedule the Windows updates and we schedule the third-party app updates to happen on a scheduled date, like a weekend, maybe the third weekend of the month. So it's very important to make sure that if you are not doing that, and you get a bad Windows update at Tuesday night, and you come in Wednesday morning, and your computer's just doing the blue screen of death over and over again, you want to have that spare device you can bring out while your IT provider gets your computer back up and running. And the next thing is data loss. I've seen a lot of people, they turn on their computers, the computer won't turn on, either ransomware or maybe the integrity has been compromised on their machine, or the confidentiality has been compromised. Maybe someone accidentally deleted something and you didn't have a backup. You have to make sure that, number one, you've got redundancy in place for data loss, but number two, make sure that you're keeping your data in a secure place. I'm going to talk about this next week. A good friend on LinkedIn requested that we talk about how to keep your data safe as a small business, so we're going to talk about that next week. But for now, if you're using OneDrive, if you're using Google Drive, if you're using Dropbox, if you know that you have files on a server, keep your information on the server. I've worked with so many professionals that put 9, 10, 11 hours into a document or into a script or into a legal agreement. And what ends up happening for these people is their computer will crash, they'll just leave it open and forget to save, and all of a sudden their computer will get turned off for maintenance, or the power goes out, or they forget about it themselves and they close the window, and they accidentally lose 10, 11, 12 hours of work. I've also seen people's desktops get entirely wiped out just from a hard drive failing, and they didn't want to have backups on that hard drive, and people are furious because they lost weeks or months of work. So make sure that you're avoiding data loss by keeping things on a cloud-based storage solution. Next threat we're going to talk about is networks. Really quickly, the outdated software and hardware for devices, that kind of applies to everything in terms of network devices, hardware, this kind of stuff. Just make sure that your IT provider has scheduled updates. If you haven't seen a Windows update in a while on your computer, that's perfectly fine. That means that they're doing their job. But in their reporting to you, they should be telling you, we've done X amount of updates this month. Your Adobe is still secure. Your Firefox, Chrome, Brave, whatever, it's all secure. Your Windows updates are happening like this. It's very important to make sure that that stuff is going on. So you want to make sure that's happening all the time. Looking at the outdated software and hardware side of things, again, with the passive network threats, you want to make sure that if you're looking at network security, your IT provider is considering passive network threats. So what that means is that if someone is going to be sitting outside of your office looking into your data, maybe they've got a device on your network that's capturing data, it means something that is capturing your data or intercepting your data or interacting with your network in a way that doesn't take it down. So this is the majority of network threats in my experience. You have somebody tap into your public Wi-Fi or your private Wi-Fi, or they've gained physical access to your server room, and they're siphoning data out is the most common type of passive network threat. And when people are able to gain access to your private or personal information, obviously that can be a big problem, and it can compromise the confidentiality of your data. So you want to make sure that you're considering passive network threats when you're considering a security plan. Next is active network threats. So this would be something where someone is denying service to your business. So if you cannot connect to the internet, or if you cannot connect to a server, like a OneDrive server or an Adobe server or something like that, where they're actually taking down your network connectivity. Maybe no one in the office can connect to the internet, or a select group of users cannot connect to the internet. So you want to make sure that you're considering active network threats and that you've got redundancy plans in place in case those happen. You also want to make sure that in case of communication failure, like I mentioned earlier, you have redundancy plans in place, and hardware or software failure. So if you have one firewall, keep a second firewall in the back room, or purchase an extended warranty from somewhere like Cisco or Unify, where they're going to be able to send you a new piece of hardware within 24 hours. It's very important to do a cost differential and make sure that you know, is it worth it for us to spend an extra $200 to have an extra Unify security gateway? Probably. If you look at the cost of downtime for a day for your staff, maybe it's not. If you buy something like a Cisco firewall and ends up costing you $7,000, $6,000, it might not be worth having a second one of those in. Maybe you're a smaller business and having your staff not work for the rest of the 4-hour day until Cisco can ship you a new piece of hardware. Maybe it's not worth it. So very important to check those out. Talking about cloud service threats and liabilities, you can have security breaches. So someone can actually hack into your account. Very important to keep that in mind. You want to make sure you're using multi-factor authentication. You want to make sure that you're using very secure passwords. And you want to make sure that you're using device authentication and you're whitelisting devices that can access your account. Again, this is stuff that your IT provider should be doing for you. It's also important, again, we've got denial of service up there. If you can't connect to OneDrive, if you can't connect to Google Drive, if Adobe can't activate, that's also going to cause downtime for you. So very important to make sure that you've got redundancy plans in place for that. And then we've got data loss. Obviously, someone can get into your Google Drive, they can get into your OneDrive, they can delete everything. A lot of people talk to me about this stuff and they say, well, why do we need a backup if we've got everything on OneDrive? It's already backed up. But what happens a lot of the time is people will go in, they'll hack your OneDrive, they'll hack your Office 365, or they'll hack your G Suite, and they'll delete all of your cloud data, and that syncs to all of your devices, and people only have their data in 2 places. They didn't follow the 3-2-1 backup rule, so because they didn't have their data in a third location that's not active and not connected to their devices, they end up losing 25, 15 years worth of business, and it's devastating. So again, very important to make sure that if you're using a cloud service, you are backing that up somewhere else, and again, making sure you have redundancy in place. Another way that cloud services can be compromised is through non-secure applications. So a lot of the time I see people downloading apps onto their work machines like Honey, the discount code application. I see people downloading Zoom a lot of the time. Zoom is absolutely horrible for privacy and security. And I see people downloading other things. Just maybe it's a Google Sheets add-on that allows them to use specific Microsoft Excel formulas that aren't accessible on Google Sheets. So when you're allowing a third-party developer to have access to your accounts, you're giving them access to your files. You're giving them access to your Google account. Sometimes that means they get your password. Sometimes that means they can control files inside of your Google Drive. If anything happens to their application, if they're a very small team of developers and maybe they get hacked and targeted, your entire business could be at risk. So it's very important to make sure you're limiting the amount of third-party applications and tie-ins on your devices. And the final thing is ransomware again. So a lot of these companies say that they are ransomware proof now. Microsoft 365 says it's ransomware proof. Dropbox says it's ransomware proof. And I like to treat ransomware proof the same way I treat waterproof. That means that if someone is saying that they are going to give you a ransomware proof product, I don't believe them. It's very important to make sure that you're keeping in mind that there is no such thing as a waterproof product. It's water resistant. It's not ransomware, it's ransomware resistant. So it's really important to make sure that you have backups and redundancies in place. That really is the best security, in my opinion and experience. There's no such thing as having a completely secure system. Every IT provider is going to come in and build you a house of cards that they say is the best and it's the most secure, and we're working with the best vendors, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, there's a bunch of 0 days out there. There's a bunch of vulnerabilities out there that can compromise their systems. So as long as they're doing their best to maintain those 4 values we talked about earlier, and they're making sure that they have redundancy plans in place and they're following the 3-2-1 backup policy, more than likely, if your business gets targeted by ransomware, you will be fine. You won't face that $116,000 USD ransom. You won't experience 16 days of downtime. Maybe if they do a good backup for you, you'll experience 1 day of downtime or 3 days of downtime, and you won't have to pay that $116,000 to the hackers. So again, it's very important to make sure that you have rules in place to address these liabilities. Next thing we're going to talk about is users. This is the way that 91% of attacks get into your business. It's not because of a piece of software. It's not because of a network. It's because of the human behind the screen. So 91% of attacks on small businesses occurred via social engineering in 2017, 2018, and 2019. So over 90%. It's very important to make sure your users understand social engineering. So we're going to talk about that very shortly. Social engineering is when the hacker hacks the human instead of the technology. If humans are going ahead and being non-compliant with the policy, we need to make sure all users are being compliant with policies you have in place. So again, we'll talk about those later, but that could be a data management policy. It could be an accessible use policy for a personal device. It could be them giving out the Wi-Fi password to their friend in your office. There's a number of ways people can break policies, and it's really important to make sure that people understand the consequences of them breaking those policies. So make sure that doesn't happen. Human error is another very common one. Again, we can't blame people for that, but it's important to make sure that if someone does accidentally delete something, or if they accidentally give out a password, or someone calls them and they accidentally give out this information, that you have that accountability in place and you can find out where this issue arose from, and then you can derive whether or not it was a malicious thing or it was an accident, and how you can work with your team to make sure it doesn't happen again. So when a fire happens, firefighters come in, they sift through the rubble, they find out what the problem was, they figure out how to make sure that they can tell the community what happened, and they can make sure it doesn't happen again. We want to have the same mindset when it comes to IT security. And also negligence. So my favorite example with this is you have accidental discharge and you have negligent discharge with a firearm. If you are someone walking around and you have something go, if you're carrying a loaded gun, you don't have a safety on, and it goes off, that's a negligent discharge. If you're someone that has an unloaded gun and just something happens where it's a total accident, maybe as you're loading the firearm it goes off, that would not be considered a negligent discharge. So there are a lot of things in place and a lot of policies and rules in place that people need to follow, and if they are blatantly violating those policies, that would fall under negligence, which in my opinion is not as severe as malicious activity, but it's a lot worse than an accident. If someone accidentally forgets to lock a door, it's not as big of a deal as if they were to just let someone walk through it. So very important to keep that in mind. So we'll move on to the next slide here. I'm going to be trying to make this very quick today. So as I mentioned earlier, social engineering is the way that 91% of modern cyber attacks occur. So it's really important that we're able to identify these 5 different types here, and we're going to go through them very briefly before I show you guys some examples of what those look like, and then we'll show you how to protect yourself from these. So looking at phishing scams, most phishing scams I'm sure people are familiar with. You get a text from RBC, you get a fake email from your boss. Microsoft says they're going to delete your account unless you change your password in the next 15 minutes. So a lot of these phishing scams, as you can see, fraudulent communication. So they're pretending to be something or someone that they're not. They use email, text, phone, or web. Phone is very common these days. I'm sure a lot of people have gotten a call from Microsoft offering to fix your computer. It's not what they're doing. And there's a lot of people that will impersonate trusted sources. They'll try to spark an emotional response. Again, they'll tell you everything in your account is going to get deleted unless you change your password in the next 15 minutes. It includes a call to action. So it'll say, change your password right now. And they'll then install malicious software or collect information from you to move on to the next form of phishing, which would be spear phishing. So we're going to go over all these very shortly, but just keep in mind, if you see any of these things in an email and it seems a little bit fishy, it's best to call your IT provider, speak with them, maybe get a second opinion from a coworker, and then you can delete the email or forward it off to an authority figure in the organization that can help you out with that. Looking at baiting, I haven't seen anyone fall for a baiting scam since probably 2007 or 2008. It's been probably 10 or 12 years. That's when you go to a website and you're the millionth visitor, so you got a $1,000 gift card to Amazon. It's very, very difficult for people to fall for these days. Most people are aware that that's a scam. But just to go over it quickly, it will bait the user. It'll say, hey, you've gotten this thing if you do this. So click here, you win $1,000. Digital bait, again, it's the most common one. Physical bait is also quite common. Maybe you'll get a phone call from somebody who says they're from the government and they need you to answer 10 quick questions and then they're going to send you 50 bucks. You know, I've gotten calls like that from Microsoft where they're doing an audit. And they'll say, we just need you to tell us what's your complexity set on your password. Do you have multi-factor authentication set up for your users? And they're just collecting information. They're just seeing, do you have these security measures in place? Are you going to be an easy target for us to hit? And then if not, they'll move on to someone else. So if you get a call from anyone asking for this sensitive data, hang up. No one is going to call you that's a serious professional and start asking you questions like this. And again, the goal with baiting is to collect information and to install malicious software on your devices, your networks, your cloud services, or to collect data from your users. So the next thing we're going to talk about quickly is quid pro quo. So again, this is another kind of interesting way that people collect data. So they exchange services for critical data. So again, I'll give you 50 bucks, you give me some data. They can impersonate a trusted source. I've seen a lot of, again, Microsoft, or another common scam that's starting to go around now is people will call in from your IT provider. So it'll be somebody who goes onto the IT provider's website, they see some of the reviews on the website, they'll call that association, say, hey, this is Bill with this company, I just started here, what's your password for this thing? It's very important to make sure you're never giving your passwords out online, over the phone. Even in person is okay, but over the phone, online, texting, I don't recommend it. The only time I recommend it is if you're able to verify someone in another method. So if someone emails you saying, hey, I need your password, you can call the person, but you have to make sure that you know the person. You have their number saved somewhere else. You're not clicking a link in their email and then calling them that way. And even then, I really don't recommend giving out passwords. Your IT provider should have your password information already, or they can reset your password and forward that to you through official channels. Again, it's very important to have these policies in place so that you don't have a miscommunication. You're not opening yourselves to this liability. And again, what they want to do, they want to collect information, they want to install malicious software on your machine. So a quid pro quo type of social engineering is you scratch my back, I scratch yours. Very important to keep that out in mind. Looking at piggybacking, unauthorized access. So again, there's a lot of people. Maybe it's someone who's being the janitor. It's a very actually common threat. It's a lot more common than people think it is. It's called an evil maid attack, where someone will, it's a cleaner, and they'll go into your business and they'll get access to your computers. Maybe they'll steal data. Maybe they'll plant ransomware on your machine, et cetera, et cetera. So you want to make sure that you are physically restricting access to your devices. If your computers are just out and about, you don't want to go home for the night and leave it unlocked. You have to make sure that it's locked, your password's on the screen, you've got a BIOS password protecting it, maybe it's fully encrypted. It's very important to make sure that you're preventing people from using unauthorized access to get access to your machines. Another common way people do this is hold the door. So someone will be coming into a shared office. Maybe you're a law firm and you've got a shared lobby. Maybe you're a film production studio, or maybe you're just an accounting firm or a bookkeeping firm. And someone will try to get into your shared space by just saying, hey, hold the door, I'm friends with the guy who runs this company. And then you let them in, and then they get physical access to an area they shouldn't have physical access to. Another common way people do this is, can I borrow your laptop? People will just say, hey, I just need to send a quick email. Can I use your phone to make a quick phone call? hey, can you text this person for me? Hey, can I use your computer really quick? I just need to Google something, or I need to send an email. Don't give people access to your personal devices. It doesn't end well for anybody. And again, the goal here, collect information, install malicious software. Pretexting is another one as well. This is probably my favorite icon. But in real life phishing, that's what this is. So someone will actually show up, very similar to kind of like a Hollywood movie where people are all dressed up in a plumbing outfit and they come in and say, oh, I need access to your pipes, whatever. So what they'll usually do is impersonate your IT provider. This happens in major corporations. This doesn't happen very commonly with SMBs or with nonprofits. This happens in like ICBC. They've been hit by this a couple of times, larger organizations, not ICBC specifically. But looking at this, you can see what they do is in real life phishing. So they'll say, hey, I'm an IT provider. We're doing a free audit. I just need access to your systems for the day. I'm from Shaw. I need access to your networking room. And people will let them in because, hey, you're from Shaw. You have a Shaw shirt. Okay, come in. They'll let the guy into the networking room. He plugs in a couple of cables. He's gained access to your network. It becomes very dangerous and a very slippery slope. So it's important to make sure that if people are getting access to areas that they shouldn't be, you've verified them in many different ways. So what they'll do again is establish trust with you. They'll impersonate a trusted source, and they'll get access to information and install malicious software. So again, these are the 5 most common ways people will hack you instead of your technology. So it's very important to keep these in mind when you're interacting with people or giving them information or giving them access to your machines. So moving on, I just really want to quickly get into the 4 most common types of phishing scams. So number 1 most common is deceptive phishing. So this is where you get an email from PayPal, Microsoft, maybe any generic source that exists that most people use, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc. And it's asking for your password. It's giving you a call to action like we talked about earlier in this slide here, where it is saying that you need to get an emotional response. It includes a call to action. They're trying to install malicious software, or they're trying to get access to your system. So that's the most common form of deceptive phishing, is a generic message with a call to action that's trying to get an emotional response out of a user. So very important to double check that stuff. If you get an email saying your stuff's going to get deleted, don't jump the gun. Spear phishing, very, very interesting. This is incredibly common. This has worked on a couple of my clients. This has worked on a number of people that I know. This is getting very advanced and very scary. So spear phishing is when they've already collected information on you, and then they go ahead and contact someone else in your organization using the information you gave them, and they gain access to information or install malware. So a very common example of this, a good example of this that happened to one of my clients is one of their partners, a vendor, was hacked. So let's say that they were a construction company and one of their part suppliers was hacked. The part supplier that was hacked, the hackers got access to all of their emails. And the hackers responded to an email that came in from the construction company within a half hour. So the construction company sent them a spreadsheet and said, here's the budget for this. Are we good to go? Can we make this purchase? And the hacker responded saying, I think that looks great, but I've made some corrections. Here's the Excel file. And they sent them an Excel file that was actually a hyperlink to ransomware. So as soon as the construction company clicked on the Excel file, that was a direct response to a trusted vendor that they'd been working with for years. We got about 50 different alerts all across their network, on their devices, that ransomware was detected on over 50 different workstations. It was detected on their networks. And it's very scary getting alerts like that for the business themselves, when all of a sudden people are working away and you just have all these red triangles start popping up on all these different machines. So just because it's coming from a trusted source, you don't want to download information or upload or access information that is not expected. So again, that doesn't mean you need to be paranoid about every interaction, every time someone sends you a file, but it's very important to not give out sensitive information so that these hackers cannot trick you or your staff, because in my experience, 99% of people will fall for that. If you get a response to an email thread that you're already in the middle of, and someone says, yeah, I know Jim's on vacation, here's his timesheet, you can take a look at it, and you're already talking to someone about Jim's timesheet, you're going to respond to that and you're going to click on that email. It just happens. So again, it's very important to make sure you're using proper antivirus, proper anti-ransomware, anti-malware software, and it's important you have backups because a lot of people get targeted by this stuff because they're using the sensitive data they've gathered on your organization to target specific members of your organization to gain access or install malware. The other type of threat that happens nowadays that's becoming, again, very, very common, this happens a lot with a lot of our clients, is that they will go after the leading members of your association by pretending to be other leading members of your association. So let's say they go on LinkedIn, they look up who the CEO, who the CFO, the CMO of your company is, or they could just know you're a small business with 5 people, they figure out who all the staff are, and they'll send a spoofed email. So for example, we have tech tips at umbrellaitservices.ca. They can go on GoDaddy and purchase a spoofed or a similar domain. So maybe it's umbrellaitservices.ca, or it's an I with a slightly different language character, etc. And they would be able to send an email to one of my staff or to myself impersonating tech tips or impersonating one of my staff. And they're going to go after me saying, hey, Jake, I'm on a client site. I got stuck here. I lost my wallet. Can you give me 20 bucks? Can you wire me 20 bucks or 500 bucks or whatever for this piece of equipment? Or I need to get a cab ride home, etc. So whaling is something that's becoming increasingly common where they're spoofing someone, they're impersonating a member of leadership, they're contacting other members of leadership trying to get funds out of an account, they're trying to get access to, again, sensitive information, or they're trying to gain access to your account. So maybe it's your boss saying, what's your password? I need it right now. There's a lot of different examples of this. And another common scam, again, that most people don't fall for anymore is Microsoft calling in, doing a Vishing scam, so voice phishing scam, or a SMiSHing scam, which would be SMS or texting scam. So you'll get a text message from RBC or TD saying, or Wells Fargo for the American people, you've got $5,000 rebate. You just need to click here, or the government messed up. You've got a $600 tax rebate. Click here. I don't know a lot of people that fall for that anymore. Most people getting phone calls from people from Microsoft know that it's a scam nowadays. So again, not too concerned about this type of threat anymore. But the spear phishing and the whaling threat, they are becoming increasingly common, very, very complex. So it's very important to keep an eye out for those. Now we're really quickly going to go over deceptive phishing scams. Then I'm going to show you guys how you can protect yourselves from all of these threats that we've discussed today, and then we'll be wrapping up. So like I said, I want to keep this a lot shorter today. So moving in quickly to deceptive phishing attacks. These are the types of messages you'll get in the original type of phishing that we discussed. So you'll get people doing these deceptive phishing scams, these generic messages, and these spear phishing scams where they use information they've gathered to target your association. So official communication, this is very common. I've seen this a lot where someone goes onto your company website, they download your logo, they find out what color scheme you have, maybe they do business with you, they send an email and they figure out what your signature looks like. And then they'll go ahead and send a big email to everyone in your staff saying, this is a member of leadership. I've attached this document for everyone to review. Please click here. And again, it usually includes company branding, and the call to action is usually saying, complete this internal task. We've upgraded your healthcare. Click here. We've got a big bonus for everyone. Click here to download it. Here's a new policy you need to read. Click here. Here's your report for the month. Click here, etc. Looking at the shipment notification, this is also very common, and I've seen this be very effective as well, where you'll get a phone call from a vendor and they say, hey, we're going to deliver $6,000 worth of printing toner to your business. And a lot of people do say, okay, yeah, I know who ordered that. Oh, it was this person that I found on LinkedIn. They go, oh, okay, yeah, that's fine then. And as soon as you say yes over the phone, you're then liable for that order. That happened to one of our clients that a new receptionist on, it was his first day, and it becomes very, very convoluted and messy. So again, very important to make sure that the data that you are giving out stays private. And if someone's calling you and you're getting a little bit fishy vibes, it's always best to just hang up and call the vendor directly and see what's going on with that. So shipment notifications also can come from UPS. They know that you order something from UPS because maybe they get access to your emails, or maybe they just, again, whatever you're posting online, if you're posting something on Instagram saying, oh, I'm excited for this, or you post on Twitter saying, oh, we've done a big order with Cisco, we're excited about this, then they can impersonate Purolator or UPS or FedEx, etc. And you'll get a fake email that says, here's the tracking for your item, and you click on it, it's a hyperlink, you've got ransomware. I think this is probably the scummiest type, the nonprofit requests. I think this is the scum of the earth. I hate these people. I've seen this happen more than a few times where people impersonate the BCSPCA, or they impersonate the Burn Fund, or they impersonate like kids, Ronald McDonald's kids hospitals. These people are disgusting. What they do is they pretend to be someone from that organization requesting a donation, and then they steal your credit card, or they gain access to your information, or they install malware to do ransomware. I've seen the ransomware equivalent with this, where they say that they're a nonprofit and they need to have you go in and do a donation, and they steal your credit card information, and then they send you a receipt. When you click on the receipt, it installs malware, so you get hit twice. It's really, really gross. But it is important to make sure that if someone calls you from a nonprofit, get the person's information, call the nonprofit back, and then go ahead through those channels. It's just always better to call people back through the official channels. Looking at the application notifications again, as we mentioned earlier, PayPal, Microsoft, Adobe, etc. Maybe your account password's reset. It'll imitate the application branding. It'll lead you to a fake landing page. You'll reset your password. You'll enter your password, and then you're in trouble. So important to not trust those. Always log into your account, reset your password if you need to do that. Important announcements. Again, this can come from internal leadership. This can come from a company like myself that's partnered with your company. So again, it's important to make sure that you're just vetting that call to action, and you're making sure that it seems legitimate. You're making sure that you've talked to other people, or you call the company or the person that sent the email themselves, and you just verify that they've actually sent this to you before you go ahead and access it. And the final thing is the last reminders, which are laced with urgency. Again, your password's going to need to be reset in the next 15 minutes. You're getting locked out of your account. All the information in your account's about to be deleted. You need to log in right now. So don't fall for this kind of stuff. Move on to the next slide here. And this is the best practices. This is what you can do to protect yourself. So again, if you want to take a picture of this screen, be my guest, share this around. This is something that's very important for people to know. Make sure that as you're going throughout your day, you're being wary of phishing scams. Make sure you're aware of any information you're providing for different people over text, email, or phone. Make sure you're not accessing suspicious links or advertisements. Again, you didn't win $1 million because you're the millionth visitor. I'm really sorry, but you didn't. Use pop-up blockers. We recommend using the Brave browser. You can get that at umbrellaitservices.ca/CTV. And we do get a little bit of a kickback from Brave for that. But the Brave browser will block pop-ups, it'll block trackers. It's very privacy-based, so very important to make sure you're using pop-up blockers. Don't plug unknown USBs into your machine. This is another very common threat, is someone will get your company branding, put them on a USB stick, go into your office to do something, drop it, leave it on the receptionist table, and people will plug that in. It'll automatically run a script, and it'll try to break into your computer. So don't plug unknown USB devices into your machine if you can avoid it. Avoid giving the internal Wi-Fi password to guests. That's very important. Make sure you're deleting emails from unknown or flagged senders. A lot of things in Microsoft 365 and G Suite now will actually tell you this is a suspicious email, and it'll get rid of it. Do not access or download unexpected files from trusted sources. Make sure you're forwarding requests for help via text, email, or phone to your team. For us, we use the umbrella button. Maybe you have an email, or maybe you have another way to reach out to your team, and you can do that. But most important is that if someone has sent you a request for help unsolicited, you're not going to respond to that. You're going to reject the unsolicited offers for help via text, email, or phone, and you're going to go back and just send in an email to the provider. You want to make sure that you're never leaving devices unattended and unlocked, and you want to make sure that you're reporting irregularities, malfunctions, or other problems to IT so that they're able to catch this stuff if they're not already aware of it. Make sure you're never giving out personal information via email or phone. If you're talking to a vendor and you're having a good time, don't tell them you're going on vacation next week. Don't tell them your kid's name. A lot of people don't need to know this stuff, and they do use that maliciously. So it's really important, again, don't give out personal information via email or phone. And absolutely do not give out your passwords via email, text, or phone. Finally, we're going to come up to this user activity checklist before we get into the backup checklist, and then we're all done. So looking at the user activity checklist for devices, make sure you're using a non-administrator account. So if you are trying to install a piece of software, you should get a little box that comes up and says enter in your admin password. You shouldn't be able to install applications directly. Makes things a little bit safer, puts up another barrier for viruses to get in. Make sure you've got scheduled software updates to make sure you're going to stay up to date and secure. Make sure that you're installing anti-malware software on your machine to protect from ransomware and viruses. Make sure you're utilizing full disk encryption. So what that means is that if someone were to steal your device or it goes missing, they're going to be able to not access all of your data. I went to a local business here recently, and I was going to clone their machine onto a new device, and I'd forgotten that we set this up for them 3 years ago or 4 years ago when they purchased the machines, and I plugged in the device to my hard drive to do the clone, and it actually came up with no data available. And no matter what I did for about 15 minutes, I wasn't able to get into the device, and I wasn't able to clone it. I wasn't able to access any data, and then I plugged it back in, I turned the machine on, and it was fully encrypted using Veracrypt, which is an open source piece of software. So again, that would have prevented me from breaking into their business, getting access to all their accounting, getting access to their passwords, etc. So make sure you're using full disk encryption. You're locking devices before you walk away from them. I do this because it's Windows key L. For those who don't know, on Windows machines, you can hit the Windows key and then L, and that'll lock your device immediately. So as I walk away, I always just do the thumb and the pinky and Windows key L. You can do remote wipe functionality as well. So if you're using Microsoft 365 or G Suite and your device gets stolen, you can click a button, and next time the device connects to the internet, all of your sensitive data will be wiped off of the machine. You also want to make sure that you're using the device appropriately. So again, acceptable use is very important. You don't need to be installing like Diablo or StarCraft or video games or letting your kids go on your work machine. It's a lot of the case that'll cause a lot more problems than it's worth. So, and also make sure you're using off-site backups for your devices. So if you spill coffee, you break it, you get a virus on it, whatever, you're going to be able to restore from the off-site backup. For your network security, make sure you're restricting physical access to infrastructure. Again, you don't want to let random people into your networking room. It should have a PIN code or a lock on the door. It should be inside of a cabinet with glass or a full-on metal cabinet with some ventilation so that people can't just walk in your networking room and plug in. You also want to make sure you're using secure networks whenever possible. So if you're going to somewhere like Home Depot, or you're going to Starbucks, or you're going to an airport, you want to make sure that you're using a VPN on an insecure network. And if you're at work, you're not using the public network, you're using a private network. Also looking at the cloud services, you want to make sure that you're using multi-factor authentication on all of your devices. You want to make sure that you're not giving out passwords over email, phone, or text. And you want to make sure you're following acceptable use and data management policies. And for the users, you want to make sure that your staff and yourself are being trained regularly in social engineering and security awareness training. I usually recommend once a quarter. And you want to make sure that everyone is following best practices. So even if that means that they just have a little printout of this, or a printout of the phishing scams or the social engineering on their wall on the corkboard that they pretend to look at every morning, that's a lot better than not having that in their face, where they can go, okay, I'm getting a weird phone call. I'm getting some red flags here. It sounds like it's a phishing scam, or it's a spear phishing scam. So it's really good to make sure that stuff stays present in people's minds, is my point. And the next thing, final slide here, is the backup and disaster recovery checklist. So again, feel free to make sure that you go over this and the security checklist with your current IT provider. Make sure you have all these boxes checked. But when you're choosing a backup, you want to make sure that you're considering the data storage. You want to make sure you're considering the method of backup and the policies. So you want to make sure that the amount of critical data that you're backing up is being considered. The amount of non-critical data is being considered. You have the frequency of backups. Maybe you don't need backups every day or live. Maybe you need them weekly. The data retention policy is also very important. The locations of the backup is very important. You need to make sure that if you need something from 3 months ago and it's on a Tuesday at 4 p.m., you're going to be able to get that data. If you only need one backup a month, then set that data retention policy. But these are these 5 points that I recommend everyone go through in terms of the storage of their data with their IT provider. The location of backups is also very important. If you're a Canadian company, you cannot store your data in American servers. There's something called the Patriot Act, which allows the American government to just simply put in a request, a warrant, or I forget the term right now, but the American government can essentially subpoena your data. So if you're a lawyer, or you're a financial advisor, or you're an accountant, or someone that has sensitive data, the US government can simply pull your client's data if it's stored in a Microsoft US server, or if it's stored in Google's US servers, or Backblaze, or these other American providers. So make sure that the location of your backup server is also being considered. Method of backup is also very important. You want to make sure you have an on-site solution if you need something fixed right away. Maybe all of your computers back up to your server in your office, and then you have a computer die. You can then just quickly do an on-site restore. An off-site solution is very important in case you get hit by ransomware, because your entire business is going to be locked down. You can then download the backups off-site, restore them to your machines, and get back to work. You also need to make sure if you only need file backups. Maybe you're a small business, you're an entrepreneur, you're a startup, you've only got 1 or 2 staff, maybe it's just you, and you don't care about your computer. You know what programs are on it. It's going to take you 20 minutes to set it back up if you have to reinstall Windows, and all you need is the files themselves backed up. Go with a file backup. It's $5–10 a month. Why not? If you go with a full system backup, that would be something that's more complex. So if you're an editor, if you're a lawyer, if you're someone an accountant or a bookkeeper that has a very, very complex setup on the way your Sage or your QuickBooks or your Final Cut or your Adobe Premiere is configured, and you don't want to spend 5.5 hours reconfiguring a machine and trying to get into your workday and forgetting all these settings that you have set up. If you're a CEO and you've got a very particular way of doing business, you want to make sure you have a full system backup so people can just download your backup, clone it onto your machine, and it's like nothing ever went wrong. You also have to consider your downtime tolerance. So again, if you're a CEO or you're an editor and you've got a 16-hour day ahead of you, you don't really have a lot of downtime tolerance. If your IT guy comes to you and says, it's going to take us a week to get you back up and running, that's straight up unacceptable for a lot of my clients. Other clients, if I say, you know what, this computer, you broke the screen on it, it's going to take us 2 weeks to get the parts in, you didn't purchase the extended warranty from Lenovo, etc. They go, okay, I don't need it for a month, so whatever, we got the backup in the back room, you already restored the backup, I don't care if this takes a month to fix, thank you very much, and that's it. So make sure you're considering those as well when you're having the discussion with your provider. And then the final thing would be the policy. So as I mentioned before, 3-2-1 policy, so make sure your data is backed up in 3 places at all times, 2 of those being different vendors, 1 of those vendors being off-site. So if you use Microsoft OneDrive, you've got it in 3 different places, so you're using Microsoft, and you've got it inside of your computer itself. That means you need a 3rd location. So maybe that's going to be Jungle Disk, maybe that's going to be Datto, maybe that's going to be Backblaze, maybe that's going to be your IT provider's custom IT backup solution. But as long as you've got Microsoft servers, your workstation itself, and the IT provider's backup, then you're okay. You want to assign responsibility of your backup. So again, if it's HR, because you're a small business, if it is going to be an IT provider because it's one guy, or if it's going to be a company like mine, you need to have responsibility, because whenever something goes wrong, I can tell you this from experience, people just go, wasn't me, it was this guy, and then they just point the finger at everyone else. So make sure you have people that are assigned responsibility. Another thing that's important is determining unique threats for your business. So again, if you're a law firm, just have a bit of a think and say, okay, I don't think we're going to be targeted by the ice cream truck anytime soon, but there is a chance that our vendors that we work with, maybe it's an MRI clinic, maybe it's, if you're a personal injury firm, maybe it's one of your corporate partners if you're a corporate firm. You need to make sure that you're considering the unique threats that could affect, again, the devices, the cloud services, the networks, or your users inside of your business. So please consider those. Make sure you're identifying critical data and resources. So again, CEO's laptop, that one firewall in the back, your server, your Microsoft Office account, those things are critical information. You need to make sure they stay protected. You also have to make sure you're specifying your backup solution, so you understand that what's happening is your data is being backed up at this schedule with this amount of data at this date to this location. Make sure you understand that stuff, and make sure that you're scheduling recovery from backups. I see a lot of IT providers go, we got the best backup in the business, never have to worry about anything, da 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 da. CEO's computer gets smashed or coffee gets spilled on it, and they go, yeah, well, we didn't test your backups for the last 8 months, and it turns out they weren't working properly, so we're going to have to wind you back to next year. Sorry. Very important to be doing at least monthly backups. We do every week with our clients. We schedule recovery from backup every week, so very important to make sure you're doing the same thing. And regularly review your recovery procedures. So again, if you have a fire drill in your office and no one knows what the fire drill plan is, that doesn't help anybody. If you have things where people are running around and everyone's just running down the stairs because they haven't reviewed the fire safety stuff in a couple of weeks, that's not going to help anybody during an emergency. So make sure you're regularly reviewing your recovery procedures. And that's it. So yeah, again, thank you very much for attending this week's webinar about security. I hope these tips were useful. I know we had a couple disruptions with the door and the phone and all these kind of things, so I do apologize about that. This is my second webinar, so I hope the next one will be a little bit smoother. But yeah, next week is going to be about preserving data for small businesses and nonprofits and entrepreneurs. Thank you again to a friend on LinkedIn for requesting that. So I'll make sure that we put something together for that. And again, probably later this afternoon, there will be timestamps in the video description down below. So if you just want to jump ahead and look at the best practices, if you just want to look at the different types of phishing scams, if you want to just look at the backup checklist, that will be down below in the description. If you like this video, please like it. If you want to see more content like this, please hit subscribe. And yeah, I hope you all have a great weekend. I hope you have a great day if you're watching this later on. And yeah, best of luck, everybody. And if you need anything else, please send an email off to umbrellaitservices.ca and reach out to techtips@umbrellaitservices.ca, or leave a comment down below with a video that you would like to see us do next time. So again,